Can you tell me about the family history of mental illness?
So my dad's, he struggled with manic and bipolar for most of his life.
You don't have bipolar disorder, like just clinically based on your entire assessment. Hey, John.
Hey, Steven.
Great to meet you. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, man, I'm excited and not normally nervous, but yeah, a little jittery. Just wanted to kind of see how everything kind of turned out.
Hey, that is normal to feel that way. I mean, you're going to have an opportunity to look at your brain, right? So I'm glad you're here. I'm thankful that you're here, and I'm really looking forward to teaching you about your brain and figuring out how to optimize it.
Sounds cool.
Tell me about what got you interested in the first place. What brought you here?
Yeah, well, I think I've always been somebody that's been interested in health. My mom was super into, even on a farm in Ohio, she was like shipping in supplements 40 years ago, and like,
oh wow,
kind of went against the grain on almost everything when it came to traditional. Like, she didn't let us play football. Why? Because she's like, I think you're gonna get injured and it's not good for you. So yeah, so anyway, so my mom was into health and wellness, and I was gonna go be a chiropractor or DO. That's what I went to college for. Undergrad was like, initially was that. And then, but I think there's always been this kind of desire to want to be better and to look at like, even now, like, saunas and cold plunges and all the the biohacking stuff, like I have a passion around. And so I want to know, do I have, I have some mental illness in our family. Like, is there anything that's affecting me that I'm not aware of there? And B, like, I got 4 little girls and a wife that depend on me, and businesses and employees. Like, how can I make myself, incrementally better?
Can you tell me about the family history of mental illness?
Yeah. So my dad's, unfortunately, he's passed away at this point, but,
how long ago did he pass?
He passed in February of 2020. So it's
pretty recent. Yeah.
Yeah. But he struggled with, it's a rough thing, but I mean, he struggled with manic and bipolar for most of his life. Really, all the life that I remember of him. He got diagnosed after my parents got divorced. He had kind of a mental breakdown after the divorce, and was in a hospital for almost a year.
That's so hard. What did he ultimately pass from?
I mean, when you go into like a nursing home kind of setting, like he went into an assisted living situation when he was, he had a second really significant kind of manic moment when my grandmother passed away, which I think there was some trauma there. Plus he inherited some money, and he kind of like, I think there was an element of like always wanting to recreate and like attain all of the things that he lost in the divorce. Like that was what 30 years was like. Yeah. So it was like a lot of material possessions. And so, he went and he just tried to recreate things when he was 30. Try to act like he was 30. So that, the sports car, young girlfriend, all that kind of stuff. And basically blew through the money to the point where it was gone, and he owed too much. And it was like one of those, like, you realize what you've done and you can't undo it. And he cracked and kind of ended up in the fetal position. And my uncle, had to kind of like essentially take him to the hospital, and then eventually like a really great assisted living facility. But, in those places, you're not eating well. Yeah. You're, like you just take, you have mental illness, you have this, you have lithium, you put this cocktail of all these drugs, and it just becomes, well, you need this drug now, and you need this drug, and you're not eating, you're not moving. It just became where he was.
Every medication has a side effect. Yeah.
Yeah. So he became a shell of it almost like he was back to being like what I would imagine him to be at like 6 or 8 years old.
Well, and then the connection between brain health and physical health, right? Like if your brain's not optimized and is not right, physical health falls to the wayside. And then the reverse is true too, right? If physically you're not living a healthy lifestyle, the brain feels the effects of that too. So, let's talk about scans now.
Yeah.
Okay. So these images that are up on my laptop here are sample SPECT images.
Okay.
The key thing to know about a SPECT scan is that we're looking at blood flow and not actual brain tissue, right? And that's what we're after, right?
Yeah.
We want to know how your brain's working. So blood flow tells us that. And the reason it tells us that is blood goes to the places that need it the most, right? So if there's a part of your brain that's really busy or really active, it's going to get more blood flow. And if there's a part of the brain that is sleepy or underactive for whatever reason, it'll get less blood flow. Okay.
Simple.
And then there's two types of scans that we're looking at today. The one on the right is a surface view. So that's looking at blood flow and activity to the outside of the brain, okay, surface. And that's more of the cognitive brain, thinking brain. Okay? This is the scan we look at when we're thinking about things like head injury, toxic exposures, things like this. On this side, we're looking at what's called the active view, which is basically a deep view, a blood flow view that's deeper in the brain. And that's more of the emotional brain, okay? Oversimplification, but it holds up pretty well. So you're looking at structures that relate more to emotional functioning when you're looking at this scan. Which scan would you like to start with?
Which is most useful from your perspective?
I think both.
Really?
So coin flip for me.
Okay. Let's go with the shape first.
Okay, let's start with the surface view.
Jeopardy, that for 500.
Okay, sounds good. So, so here is your scan. And what we're noticing is really good blood flow to much of your brain, but then a couple regions where we're seeing some reduced activity.
Yeah.
And the regions that I want to highlight are these two, okay? And then also this area right up here.
Okay.
So these two here are known as the temporal lobes, okay? So just to show you on the brain model, it's these guys.
Okay. Little wings.
Yeah. The temporal lobes are located right near the temples, hence the name. And one way to think about what they do functionally is they're sort of like the temporal lobes, in that they are really important for mood regulation, okay? So when someone has reduced activity in the temporal lobes, it can feel like it's harder to regulate a strong mood in the moment, right? Which is not the same as bipolar disorder, right? I think of it just visually as like if you've ever gone bowling, as like bumpers in a bowling alley, right? You can put the bumpers up and it makes bowling a whole lot easier, right? In this analogy, the bowling ball represents whatever you're holding on to emotionally, right?
Okay.
So when the bumpers are up, things can feel like it's in a solid range. When the bumpers go down, we're a little bit more likely to feel high highs and low lows, right? Which is not the same thing as bipolar disorder, but it can show up as anxiety, as depression, as anger, things like that, okay? The top reasons for this include head injury, okay? And I know you've sustained some head injuries in the past, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, snowboarding.
Right. In your 20s, was that right? Yeah. How bad was that injury?
Not bad enough to go to the doctors or anything.
Okay, well.
Yeah, maybe I should have.
So those are really the main things to show you on the surface scan. So like I said, lots of really, really good, healthy blood flow, and then a couple areas where we can optimize things. And there's always something to optimize.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at the deep scan now, okay? So I'll put it right here.
Stuff all over the place there.
And we'll break it down and explain everything. Nothing scary, nothing dangerous, but certainly a busy brain, okay? And what's really interesting about the pattern that you have here is that you're showing something called a diamond pattern, and I'll explain what that is, okay? So I've circled 4 areas that are of most interest to us, right? And if you connect those 4 areas, it looks something like a diamond, right?
Yeah.
Use your imagination. And so we call this a diamond pattern. And the reason diamond patterns are important is that we've done something like 250,000 scans. And in that database, people who have a diamond pattern are far more likely to have experienced past emotional trauma of some kind, right? So it's a correlation, but it's a really, really strong correlation.
Yeah.
So whenever I see a diamond pattern, the first thing I'm thinking of is, has there been a history of past emotional trauma? And I believe the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. People are always asking, like, do I feel the way I feel because of my genetics, because of my biology? Is it my psychology? Is it my environment?
Yeah,
the answer is yes, because it's all the same thing, ultimately, right? Environment shapes biology, 100%, right? Diamond patterns are an example of that. What we go through literally affects how blood flows through our brain. You don't have bipolar disorder, like just clinically, based on your entire assessment, that's not your diagnosis, right? But having a family history of bipolar disorder can cause the thalamus to be a little heated up, right? But you also have other reasons to have a hot thalamus, like the past trauma, right? Mm. So I'm not taking this to mean bipolarity, right? Because it doesn't match up with anything else that I've learned about you. Okay?
Yeah.
You don't have a diagnosis of bipolar, but at the same time, we should be thinking about ways to calm down your thalamus. So there are a couple suggestions I would have. One is really focused on calming down the red and the white, and the other two are focused on helping stabilize temporal lobe functioning.
Yeah.
Okay? So actually I have them here. So the one that could be really good for calming down the diamond pattern is known as Happy Saffron Plus. This has curcumin in it, which is basically a derivative of turmeric, but more effective and actually gets into the brain better.
Okay.
So that's one of 3 ingredients. It also has zinc. It also has saffron, but not like dietary saffron, like high potency saffron extract. It turns out that that increases serotonin level in the brain to a similar extent as antidepressants, but naturally, right? So in addition to the Happy Saffron, the other thing that I was thinking about for you is called Brain and Memory Power Boost. Not because you're having memory issues, but because this has 6 ingredients that either boost blood flow to the surface scan and or reduce inflammation. And so it's really good for helping sleepy temporal lobes. It's got things like ginkgo, huperzine, alpha lipoic acid, N-acetylcysteine, a whole bunch of stuff. But every ingredient has a reason why it's in there. And ultimately, the common denominator is boost blood flow, including to those bumpers.
Yeah.
So I think that could be a nice addition for you. Yeah, John, so that's the tour through your brain. I think we've learned a lot. I'm really, really optimistic about where we can take this, and just also appreciative that you're willing to come in, take that leap, share your story. You know, that takes a lot of bravery, obviously.
Yeah, well, thanks for being so thorough. It's I knew there'd be some things, but it actually exceeded my expectations. So thanks for going all in.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
You too.